and I'll hop in, or what do you guys want to do?
I'm gonna bombard you with questions, and we're live at 5, 4, 3, 2, and I think we're live. Yeah, we're live.
Perfect.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for tuning in one more time. Ernesto Vega, Broker Canvas Real Estate, coming to you live one more time, bringing you a topic that we've been asked a lot. And actually, Ruben was kind enough to help us bring in this great presenter today to help us understand how the appraisal industry have changed by COVID. I mean, it was a change that was going to happen anyway, and how our virtual appraisals and drive-by appraisals being done and taken into consideration. Like I was saying, my name is Ernesto Vega, broker of Canvas Real Estate. If you're the first time watching, thank you for tuning in. If you are a regular, once I thank you for following. If you could be so kind, and if you're watching us on social media, if you can hit the like button and the share button, because the information that Ruben and Luke that are gonna share is information that everybody in our industry needs to get familiarized with. So like I always do, I'm gonna go down the line and let both of my co-hosts jump in, present themselves, talk about what they do for fun, what they do for a living, something about themselves that they want to feel like sharing today. So Ruben, I know you and me they're tired of seeing, but go ahead. For those watching that have never seen Ruben Crispino before, please don't talk about the Marlins.
I will not talk about the Marlins.
Okay, good.
So we're living in crazy times, but so my name is Ruben Crispino. I'm the area manager for CMG Financial here in South Florida, one of the largest mortgage companies in the country. Very happy to introduce Luke to you guys. He's going to run the show. He's got all the answers. I'm an old-time appraiser. I forgot half the things already. So I'll let him answer what's going on with new things. And as far as what I do for fun, I try to play a little golf occasionally and hit the ball straight, but it doesn't always work out straight. But we're doing okay. That's the only thing I can do nowadays, right? Because they have us individual golf carts and we're outside. So
you're outside. Man. That's the most important thing. That's the more important thing.
That's it. It's all you, Luke.
So Luke, he's pumped you up like there's no tomorrow. So you have a long expectation now to meet. So go ahead.
I will do my best. Thank you, Ruben. Thank you, Ernesto. Hi, everybody. My name is Luke Tomaszewski. I'm the CEO of Evaluation Zone. We're an appraisal management company. We work directly with Ruben's group, CMG, out of Florida and across the country. We operate in all 50 states. I'm an appraiser myself, have been for the last 18 years. I'm a certified residential appraiser in 9 or 10 states off the top of my head personally. I'm on the FHA roster along with the VA roster for Chicago specifically. So just the benefit there is that I can answer, some, VA related questions. I know some of the topics that we're going to cover today are some of the COVID-related inspections. It's definitely calmed down a little bit since the beginning, where a lot of borrowers were very worried to let appraisers in. We've had stories of some appraisers buying hazmat suits and going into borrowers' properties. It's been, it's gotten to that point in some situations, but it's definitely calmed down since. So right now, what we're mostly seeing is, a lot of our appraisers are wearing, the face mask, sometimes rubber gloves, and it's all, per the, buyer, the borrower, or the realtor's request. So I always tell the appraiser to accommodate, whatever the POC is really looking for. And we'll also run into situations if it's, somebody a bit elderly, might have some health issues. We recommend that they maybe just hang out on the deck, take a walk around the block, let the appraiser, do their inspection for the next 15, 20 minutes, whatever it takes. And with that being said, I mean, the GSEs, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and FHA, they've been very proactive about it when COVID hit. It was probably the fastest response that we've seen from the GSEs to make, appropriate alterations to, the appraisers' inspections. So they've given us a few, guidelines to follow. And again, it all comes from the GSEs, and then we have to, update the lender, in this case being CMG, where in some cases, if it's a purchase and it qualifies, the appraiser has the ability to do a desktop appraisal, which means they don't enter the property. They simply collect all of the subject information from the MLS photos. They could call the realtor, the seller to, get any type of information that they need, and they never set foot on that property or in front of that property. And then the next step after that is for some, refinances. There are situations where the lender and the GSEs do approve something called a drive-by appraisal, which means that the appraiser simply goes in front of the property, takes the photos, but they never step foot inside again. With that being said, again, every loan is, specific and it has to qualify for this type of inspection. Not all loans qualify. I'd say still a small percentage qualify for this. The typical is still the traditional inspection method. That is the preferred method by, the GSEs, Fannie and Freddie. They still want us to, the first option be a full appraisal where the appraiser goes in, documents the property, takes the photos, measures it. But again, if there's, a situation where for some reason they cannot enter, then, we let the lender know, and then they, run the scenario if one of these alternate inspection scenarios are allowable, and then we direct the appraiser to do that. And then just to wrap that side up, we've developed an internal technology to make it a little bit easier for the realtor or the seller to provide the appraiser with photos and certain information. We've had several lenders that have gotten, tried to, do it themselves, where they have the borrower or the seller provide photos and they send an email, but the email gets rejected because they attach 20 photos and most mailboxes don't take more than 10 megs. So that's become a nightmare. Some lenders have set up Dropbox accounts, and not everybody's, they've had some difficulty managing that. So we just developed an internal application where it's just a phone app. It's called Proxy Pix Direct. It's a technology company that we have. Very easy to use. We specifically tell the homeowner what photos to take. They simply take them on their phone. Once they're done, they hit submit. The appraiser gets that information. And then we've got a lot of security things in the back end where we're enabling the GPS coordinates. So every time you take a photo, we're locking in the longitude and latitude. So we know that the person taking the photos is actually taking photos of the subject property. So that's been, very well received, and just a little bit easier of a process than what, other lenders have done in the past. So that's something, that I recommend people do use. It's a great security overlay, and just ease of use is the good thing there. But that's just a quick summary of, what's going on. And if there's any questions right now, I'm happy to, answer some while we, keep the conversation moving.
Well, take a deep breath. I think you're going to get a lot of questions.
So question number one is for both of you. It is I send out always an email. I always get a couple of questions from agents in the field. What makes the lender, Ruben, decide this is going to be a drive-by appraisal or this is going to be a virtual appraisal? What criteria is there on the buyer side?
It's mostly risk. So the lower the risk, the more possibility of being able to do an alternative inspection. And I think we mentioned the last time we were on together, we're starting to get appraisal waivers on a lot of our deals where there's just no appraisal required based on how solid the risk is or how solid the buyer is.
Okay, so which is going to be used depends the viability of your buyer, right?
Yeah, and it's not a CMG exclusive program. It's part of the Fannie Freddie platform, where when you run DU through there, it'll tell you if you're getting an appraisal waiver or not. So it's not exclusive to us. I wish it was, but it's based on people do math a lot better than me, that I still use my fingers, So that they do some kind of negative regression analysis, and they come up with the risk base. And if it's, somebody's putting down 50% with an 800 credit score, what do you really need an appraisal for?
Yeah.
Sorry, Luke.
I'm crying on the inside.
I know.
Okay, so Luke, you touched on something and said you guys have your own tech, which it's great because your industry and my industry and Ruben's industry, we all had this tool chest of technology that we were playing with, but we were not really implementing. Yes. And then all of a sudden we had to say, we gotta go. Mm-hmm. Luckily, the three of us had tech. A lot of people listening to us right now did not have any tech, and they're trying to still catch up.
Sure.
So last time we spoke, one of the questions that was asked of Ruben was, the virtual appraisal, where you guys look at the photos of the MLS or you get the photos of the homeowner. That's the question there was, well, how do you verify that data? How do you verify that the Sub-Zero refrigerator, the Wolf stove, the brand new patio, I mean, all of that, it's actually
Sure.
real,
No, great questions. Yeah, so those we get quite often. So, like I said, the GSEs, they offer these alternative inspection scenarios quite quickly, which is impressive. But that's about all they said, that you can collect photos from a third party. They didn't give any specifics on how you would do that, just that you have the ability to do that. So some of the security overlays that we have, as I mentioned, we're the very first piece from day one when we started the company. We use something called it's a geofencing technology. So we're using Google Maps as our mapping software. So when you put in an address into Google, it always drops that orange pin or the red pin on the top of the property. What we're actually doing is we're setting up a virtual fence around the property. So let's say if you're at the wrong house 3 blocks away, we're just going to lock up your camera because we're setting up a 300-foot fence around the property. If you're outside of that virtual fence, we just don't allow you to take photos. So that's number one. Once you're within that fence, we're embedding the longitude and latitude of every photo taken. And then if you're taking photos of a computer screen, a book, anything like that, we're also able to recognize if that's a 2D or a 3D image. So we've got a lot of, security and fraud overlays, and that's the biggest concern, for the lenders, the banks that use this type of technology, where you're not submitting photos of, somebody's house on the internet that's gorgeous and your house is falling apart, as an example. So again, it's something relatively new. We've launched this company about 3 years ago, and the technology is going to, continue to just get better. We're experimenting with 360 video walkthroughs now. We're in some talks with the GSEs, with Freddie Mac specifically. So those are some things that they're exploring right now, are potential alternatives that are even better than photos.
Okay, and like Ruben said, at the end of the day, it lands on the buyer, how solid the buyer is.
Exactly.
Okay. So I'm familiar with Chicago. I go to Chicago a lot more than
You spent a lot of money in Chicago.
a lot more than I should. So South Florida, it's having South Florida is having a great year right now when it comes to real estate.
Yes.
Although even in the middle of this pandemic, certain real estate is so local. Certain markets and price values are doing very well, where we have had about a 14%, you can say, already in the half of the year in appreciation.
Yes.
With an uncertain future ahead. So when you, from an appraisal perspective, when you see that ramp up appreciation, how do you account for that when an order is given?
Sure. So there's a lot of research the appraiser has to do to justify the price increases. So just like South Florida, we're seeing it across the country, where not only is there a shortage of listings. Last time I checked, I think nationally we have about 750,000 listings, compared to last year around this time we had about 1.2 million. So there's a significant decrease in the listings. So we've got a shortage, which will, our typical supply and demand issue, as we know. And a lot of those properties got pulled in the beginning of COVID. So that's the reason that we've had a lot of, listings get pulled. And then I'd say the other increase, the reason for the increase for the pricing is the low rates, which, is keeping, us and Ruben, very busy. And it's a great time to, refinance, purchase, anything like that. I mean, Ruben, I don't know. I don't think I've seen rates this low. I thought 2016 when I refied was the lowest I was ever going to get. And have you seen lower than this, just out of curiosity?
No, and I'm old, so I haven't seen them this low. But yeah, it's industry wide. It's just kind of crazy what's happening, and it's all about liquidity right now and supply and demand. Like you said, actually, I just got off the morning update with Barry Habib, and I guess one of the big numbers that came out either yesterday or today was pending home sales for June are up almost 17% year over year. That's pending home sales. So those are contracts signed in June. That's a lot.
Crazy. Yeah, it's insanity. So I mean, that's one of the things that the appraisers are having a fun time with. So we've got lots of properties with multiple offers that are going above the list price, and what the appraiser has to do on their end, number one, they've got to run the market analysis, determine if there's a shortage, which in most markets there is. Then they've got to determine if if they have data to support a increasing price trend within that market. So typically in the appraisal on the first page, there's a neighborhood section, and the appraiser will check off the market's increasing, stable, or declining. So that's the first piece of information that we're looking at. Then you'll typically see a separate page of the appraisal, which is the 1004 MC. That's a market conditions addendum. They go a bit more in depth on the supply scenario. They basically do the last 3 quarters of the year to determine if there's a increase or decrease on not only the closed sales but the listings. And then we're also looking at the listings and the pendings to see if those things are getting higher listing prices than the properties that have closed in the last 2 or 3 months. So then we really have to start establishing that data trend to determine can we support a 1%, 2% increase month over month, whatever it might be. Every market is specific to itself, and if the appraiser has enough data to actually support that, then they could start providing positive time adjustments within the sales grid. So any sale that maybe happened 9 months ago from the effective date, they could provide a positive time adjustment. And we're actually building out a webinar on that specifically. So once I build that out, I'll let you guys know where we're going to have specific screenshots of an appraisal. We'll provide some data on how the appraiser analyzes that specific data to determine the percentage increases that they could then apply to the comparables. And that's how we really start establishing a trend that the market is really increasing. Here's the data to support it, and the sales that closed 6 to 9 months ago don't reflect today's market, and that's why we have to provide a 5% time adjustment to account for what's happening today.
Okay, so that I mean, you said a lot of stuff. You said a lot of stuff, a lot of good stuff in there that I want to unpack.
Sure.
So in the markets, because like I said, every market it's different. Like I know for instance, I know that the Wilmette area, the luxury market in that area, it's tanking for whatever reason. It's especially right now during the pandemic. So you're following trends on what not happened 6 months ago, but what has happened in the past 3 months, right?
Yeah, the closer to the effective date, the better. I mean, we want the sales to be as recent as possible, but not always a possibility with comparables.
Okay, so what do you do? And this is a case that we have in a community which there hasn't been any sales in 2 years and no like-kind property in the past year.
Sure.
So do you go replacement value, or do you just say okay and move on?
No, at that point, I mean, the appraiser has the ability, we have 3 approaches. There's an income approach, which wouldn't apply really to a single family home for the most part. There's a cost approach, but again, that's more so for new construction. So what we're typically doing is the sales comparison approach, which is the sales that occurred within the last 12 months. And in a scenario like that, what we'd have to do, and the GSEs do allow for it, is for the appraiser to go to a competing market to find sales. So let's say, we have Wilmette as our example, which is a high-end neighborhood. It's a suburb of Chicago. Then, a typical buyer might consider another high-end market like a Highland Park is another competing market to Wilmette, let's say. Okay. And same idea, anywhere across the country. So then what the appraiser has to do is, first off, we're expecting the appraiser to understand and really know the market that they're in. So very quickly, they should be able to determine that, I have no sales within the past 12 months here, but let me go into, the suburb next door or, 2 miles away, and I know it's a competing market. So then we'd expect them to do a little bit of, analysis. So let's start analyzing the median sales price for the last, 6 months in this market and compare it to our median sales price to our subject subdivision. We could go, 1 year back, 2 years back, and compare the 2 markets to each other. And if they have a relatively similar median sales price, perfect. Now we've determined that is a competing market. So a typical buyer that would buy within our subdivision would also consider this subdivision in this example. And that's what we'd start doing. Let's say if it's an even worse scenario where I, for some crazy reason, can't find a competing market, let's just find something as similar as possible. Let's determine that between our subject subdivision to the competing subdivision, there's maybe a 10% variance, and our subdivision selling for 10% more. Let's use those sales, but then we're going to apply a location adjustment within the sales grid and apply a positive 10% adjustment. Now we have the data to support that. So we've got to get creative sometimes, and that's just how you do it. As long as our appraisers have the data to support the adjustments and what they're doing, it's perfect. That's all we're looking for. Just support what you're doing and explain it.
Once again, thank you for everybody that's watching us live and both platforms, and please hit like and share to make sure we get this to as many people as possible. Now, this is a typical realtor question. So Ruben, I'm going to go to you first, and Luke, you can jump in.
Sure.
Market is tight. I got to get my offer accepted. I need the appraisal in 3 days. And Luke is like, yeah, not happening. In reality, in today's tight environment, we listed something yesterday, Ruben, in Pembroke Pines, and it had 37 offers. The one that they're taking, Luke, is 12% above asking in cash.
Yeah.
So
we're both out of business on that one.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, but if they were to take a financing one and the buyer's like, listen, I can get in reality, how quickly can you get an appraisal in this tight environment with so much, and including refis?
So there's no question that overall we're taking longer than we would like to and we expect to. But, and I'm not just saying that because he's on, but we're pleasantly surprised by how not so far behind the appraisals are as far as time frame. But just like with everything with us, it's got to kind of come in clean in the sense that we need to make sure we have the right address with the right contract, the final contract, no addendum here or there. The person gives us the right credit card number so we can order the appraisal. So that does affect the appraisal side of it, getting it back. The same thing with us on the mortgage side. We need everything right away. The cleaner, the sooner that we can get it. We're still pretty much meeting our closing dates. But if it comes in, with a screenshot and this, and in other words, if the buyer's not invested in it, or the realtor's not helping them enough, it makes it very difficult to meet the timelines. But I don't know. I think it's a better question for Luke. Are you guys a few more days out, or what are you out?
A few more days out. I mean, I'd say, God, off the top of my head, I'd have to check Florida, but I think we're at about 5 to 7 days ish, roughly. If it's a typical property, not rural, anything like that. I'd say one of the, big reasons for, I've heard that other AMCs, other lenders, we're definitely experiencing longer turn times. But for the most part, we're still trending relatively well. And the reason we've got a very good, foothold in Florida, like Ruben said, I mean, CMG is very busy, so we're keeping our appraisers very busy. I'm an appraiser myself. Anybody that does reviews in my office is a certified appraiser, which not only I feel that speeds up the process. Other AMCs that work with other lenders, they have QC analysts, which means it's just anybody sitting behind the computer. They go down a simple checklist to review that appraisal. And if something doesn't apply and they can't check that box, they have to reject that appraisal, send it back to the appraiser for corrections. And that could delay the process by up to, an easy 48 hours, if not 3 days, depending on, when the appraiser takes the time to look at it. The reason that we went with the approach of having certified appraisers do all of the reviews is we don't have a checklist, anything like that. I tell my internal appraisers, review the appraisal. If it's supported, it makes sense, deliver it to the client. We don't have other AMCs, they work with, 10, 20 different lenders. And to make it easy, they combine all of the lenders' overlays into one engagement letter. So let's say if we worked with CMG and Chase's example, and Chase had, 3 extra overlays that they wanted in an appraisal. Most AMCs would, even for the CMG work, they'd say, include these 3 things. We don't do that. We treat each lender separately. I don't want to say that we're looking for the bare minimum, but we're not adding extra lender overlays. So we know that the appraisers are busy. We just want a clean, supported appraisal. With that, we're paying the appraiser about 80% of what we're collecting from the lender, which is, a relatively high fee compared to what they're used to. We're paying them in about 20 to 30 days, which is quick. And then our coordinators are divided up by region. So not only, does the client, but the appraiser also gets to know the person that's, assigning the work. They get to understand their workload, things like that. So it's not rocket science. We just treat, the appraisers well. We really like working with, Ruben's group. They provide us, if it's a purchase, we get the contract. It's usually the most updated contract with all the addendums, like Ruben said, because we've run into that scenario multiple times, especially on new constructions with other lenders where, we submit the appraisal at 300,000. They come back and they're like, hey, the contract's at 350,000. What's going on? And we're like, we don't know. That's the latest contract we've got. And they tell us, there's been 2 change orders since, and we're not aware of it. So, but yeah, Ruben's team, they've been great. They always provide, everything that we need. So it's rare that we have to reach out for additional information to delay that process. We've got some great appraisers, in the Florida market, which has been very helpful for us.
Okay, so Ruben, to recap all of that, if showing properties on the weekend, got a contract done on the weekend, your team, anybody in your team gets a full executed contract, all addendums, everything, good through that loop on Sunday. Monday, you're reordering from Luke. By the following Monday, there should be an appraisal already back in somebody's hand, right?
Yeah, unless there's some extenuating circumstances, yeah.
Okay.
And like I always tell your group specifically, or anyone that I do an appraisal class for, is these guys, these appraisers, they're busy, we're busy, and anything we can, your realtors can do to help is great. I mean, some appraisers go a little snippy, obviously, but if you can provide the survey, if you can provide comps, if you can provide information regarding when you meet the appraiser there, I think it's important that one of the realtors show up, either the listing agent or selling agent, because the buyer and seller.
Say that again, please. I didn't hear that.
I think it's important that one of the realtors show up to the appointment. There could be things that, no matter how in tune with the market the appraiser is, we talk about this where you and I live, Ernesto. Zillow has my house really highly inflated, but I'm on the wrong side of Dixie. I mean, of Federal. It doesn't know that. I know that. But but the point is, there's little nuances to neighborhoods or houses that appraiser may not pick up right away. I mean, it's a lot of houses. People do change them. A lot of factors go into play. So as a realtor, since you're the expert of the neighborhood, you should be there to share that with them. And they may or may not think it's important, but the bottom line is you work together to make it all kind of happen. And there's an old saying, smooth is slow and slow is fast.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think at the inspection and at the appraisal, it's part of your duty as a professional. You gotta be there because technically the house and you're vested in it. So, okay, Luke. Now I have a question that is an uncomfortable question.
Sure, I'm ready.
So, because of, and like I said, in South Florida has some markets that are let's say that, like Pilsen, that you have open the values change from block to block. Right?
Chicago very well, I must say.
So you'll do an appraisal and it'll come in 15% below.
Sure.
Right? And I always say to the realtor, first of all, were you there? No. Well, mistake number one.
Yep.
What data can they provide to appeal or rebuttal the appraisal?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Appeal or rebuttal? What is the correct phrasing?
It's both. You could call it, just simply sending us an appeal or rebut the appraisal. So we'll see both sides. It's the same thing. But yeah, no, it's a great question that comes up quite often. So look at the appraisal and give the appraiser, I'd say, the opposite of what they're maybe missing in the appraisal. So one of the scenarios that I like to give, let's say you have 1,000 square foot ranch, which is the subject property, and the appraiser used, all 1,000 square foot ranches, but they all sold, 6 to 9 to 12 months ago. So they're all very similar, in size and room count, but they sold, 6+ months ago. So don't look at, finding, 1,000 square foot ranches to give the appraiser that sold 6 to 12 months ago. Maybe look at something that's a little bit smaller, a little bit larger, but maybe sold within the last 90 days to show, what's currently happening in the market. or vice versa. So that's what I always recommend. Don't send the appraiser a farm list. We have that happen sometimes where the contract price is 200,000 and it's 1,000 square foot ranch, and the realtor sends 20 sales of 2,000 square foot ranches that sold for 200,000, and it's like, no, don't do that. It's got to be a comparable property. I know it sounds goofy, but it still happens. So I'd say don't give, in our rebuttal form that we give to CMG, we say, don't provide more than 5 sales to the appraiser. The appraiser typically puts 3 closed sales and 2 actives or pendings on the appraisal. So providing any more than 5 really doesn't make sense. So do the research, look at the interior photos, and make sure that it's comparable to the subject property. One of the first things that we do if an appraisal comes in under the contract, and we get some data provided to us, before I start looking at outside sales, I first look at the appraiser sales along with the subject. I want to see what the subject looks like on the inside, if it backs up to a golf course, a highway, what the comparables do, what they back up to, what the conditioning is. So I want to analyze what they did first, and that's what I definitely recommend for anybody reviewing an appraisal. Before you start looking for outside sales, analyze the appraisers first. Do they make sense? Let's say if we're backing up to a woods view, a forest preserve, and all of the appraisers sales back up to residential or something more commercial, then clearly we've got an issue there, because a typical buyer will pay a bit more for that private view. So start looking at things like that before you start venturing into new sales. And that's, really what I recommend. Once you really start sitting down and analyzing what the appraiser did, it'll give you a bit more insight to maybe, I should look for, these types of sales to provide to the appraiser. And with that being said, I mean, don't tell the appraiser, they're wrong, that they shouldn't have done this or that. It's not going to go over well. Always take the proactive approach. That's what we do when we call the appraisers. The first thing out of my mouth isn't, what the hell did you do? How'd you pick these comps? They're horrible. It's, give you a better understanding of, how'd you choose these comparables? And then, we'll talk about it. And then, I'll say, what if, would you consider looking at these? And it goes over, a lot better where, we're just trying to get some feedback from the appraiser opposed to telling them what to do, because that, number one, we can't do that. And number two, they're the local professional in that market, not me. So I'm just trying to gather more information from them.
Okay, so Ruben, the question I have now is, something that we see a lot in our market, which are these fix and flips. You see them in Lions Park, you see them in Imperial Point. That the house was bought 6 months ago for $327. It's been completely redone and it's now pending a $527, right? And it's literally a 6 months process. That some of those appraisals don't hit the 500 because so how does an agent what do you provide, or what do you need to make sure that that it's taken into account all the work that was done into this property?
Well, I mean, it should be, no different than what Luke just said. I mean, it should be pretty evident. I mean, once the appraiser gets there, if the work's been done, it should be pretty obvious that this has got, complete renovation. It goes back to, what I've always said, it's all market specific. So yeah, you brought up 2 neighborhoods that, renovation does go a long way because they're out east and they're mostly smaller, older homes. So renovation definitely goes a long way. But by the same token, you take a house in Parkland that they're all pretty new, pretty big. And yeah, the guy put in, like we always talk Brazilian wood floors. Well, all the houses in Parkland have pretty nice floors. You know what I'm saying? So I think it's market specific. In the neighborhoods you mentioned are great examples of where fix and flips or renovations go a long way, just because they were originally built in the 60s, possibly maybe the early 70s. So they either didn't have them or had renovation maybe 20, 15 years ago. So it's also the time frame. And Luke will tell you, when they look at the pictures of the comparables on the MLS, they're looking at inside the interior picture. So I mean, you can tell quite simply if it's got a mica renovated kitchen. Well, that was probably renovated in the 90s, right? As opposed to what we know now. So I think it's a combination of quality and time, right? So if you're talking about 6 months more or less fix and flip, although Luke very well he described very well the process of making time adjustments, he'll tell you it's not easy. It's not easy for an appraiser to make that time adjustment. And while I hate to say, appraisers are a little behind, we are because, something closes and, by the time it hits public records, I say you have a couple of weeks or a month behind. And when the market's moving as quick as it is today, it's tough to catch up for the appraiser and to be able to document. One of the things, we've always mentioned is, well, somebody's willing to pay this. Why isn't it worth it? Well, we're not selling art here. At the end of the day, if they're paying cash, like your example in Pepper Pines, then you don't need an appraisal, you don't need a loan. But if you need a loan and I'm going to lend you the money, then I want to make sure that not only are you willing to pay that, but the market is willing to pay that. And that's the whole reason behind the appraisal. If we do have to take back the property, that we can resell it in the general market for that amount, not just to that one specific person.
So Luke, now going to you, does a list of all upgrades, brand new roof, brand new electrical, new bathrooms, does that assist you in the process, or do you guys out on the field, or just a visual inspection is enough?
I say provide, the appraiser as much information about that rehab as possible. It definitely helps. It gives the appraiser more information to not only analyze, but typically we see appraisers, scanning those sheets into the appraisal. So if you bought that house for 100K, now you're reselling it for 300K, and it was 6 months ago, number one, in the appraisal, we're going to see that prior sale from, 6 months ago. And that's going to raise not only a red flag to us on the review side, but we're submitting every time we get an appraisal from an appraiser, we automatically have to submit it to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and they issue us a risk score. And one of the things that will pop up will be that prior sale, and a red flag will be, why on earth is it selling, 6 months later for such an increased amount? So we'll see the risk flag pop up from the GSEs. Our review team will analyze that appraisal. We're expecting to see a lot of commentary in the improvement section stating that, the property's undergone a full gut rehab, and give the details of, new plumbing, new electric, all of this good stuff. And then we're also expecting to see some commentary on the prior sale from 6 months ago. So right below the sales grid, the appraiser has to analyze the last 3 years of any sales for the subject property. So right in that section, we'd expect to see that, the property was purchased 6 months ago. It was an as-is sale, and since then it's undergone a total rehab, hence why we have, the increase in value. And Ruben could tie into this a bit more, but I know in some scenarios we are required to do 2 appraisals on properties like that.
Okay.
Depending on the type of loan, yeah, and the amount of increase.
Because Ruben, especially in Lions Park, you will find homes at 500 that already been fixed, but then you'll their sale that hasn't been fixed at 320, 340, and right. It's hard. But you open up Pandora's box with you mentioning of Parkland. So the question I got is, if my client paid $100,000 for that lake view, why is it now only worth 15? These are new homes, Luke, that were built about 2 years ago. And when they bought it, Toll Brothers was a big builder out there. So they had monumental lot premiums. Not reasonable, monumental. And now, and resale comes around a year or two later, Ruben is not going to pay $100,000 for that view, huh, Ruben?
I don't think so.
Yeah, it all comes down to the market reaction. Like Ruben said, if a loan ever defaults, the lender has to have the ability to, resell that property. And all that we're doing as appraisers, we're just analyzing what a typical buyer would do in that neighborhood. So, if you bought that property 2 years ago and you paid $100,000 for that, lake view, if the buyers of, today would be willing to pay $15,000 or $20,000, that's what we're analyzing. We're looking at, the most recent sales, and I'm comparing, if something sold, 30 days ago with that lake view, and then I want to compare it to a property that sold without that lake view. It's called a paired sales analysis. I'm basically extracting the data to figure out what the difference in prices for that lake view to the non-lake view. Okay. And, if I've got a few sales that really support, $15,000, $20,000, there's absolutely no support for that $100,000, view that happened 2 years ago. So as we know, the market, it always changes. It could be, a developer sale like that where they, place that price and people were paying that, but now they're not. We've had it in, 2008, 9, 10 with the REO sales where, the market was super hot and then it just tanked. So it's all, it's all time. I mean, everything changes and it all comes down to the buyers. That's what we're looking at and analyzing.
Okay, so then those premiums, Ruben, that are still being fetched in those properties, it's enjoyment, right? You're paying for that enjoyment. You're not paying for, you might get a resale, but you're paying for something you're gonna enjoy. That's it.
Well, it's like Luke said. There are situations where the builder charged a premium for whatever, and over time, that premium either maintains that cost that the builder or has gone up. A good example, which is completely different, would be a condominium where, for example, the builder's charging $1,000 per floor as you go up, right?
Yeah.
And remember what happened in 9/11? It was just the opposite happened. You were paying more for property, so it just changes all the time. So there's no black and white answer to anything. That's why we as lenders we need the appraisers to be out there and analyze the data to make sure that the asset or the collateral better base is secure.
Okay. This one is Ruben and Luke. I got two. I'm gonna go with the first one. The first one is it a myth or is it true that FHA appraisals are bound to a property for 6 months?
Fact.
That's fact.
Okay, so if it appraises at 250 today, doesn't matter what, for the next 6 months is worth 250.
Exactly. So if you have a seller that decides, I want to sell it for 260, but the appraisal came in at 250 and it's an FHA appraisal, I'd say really consider, working with that current buyer, the current, mortgage company to make that deal work, because it is tied for the next 6 months and that's not changing. So your only options are conventional and VA at that point, which will limit the market by, quite a bit for your pool of buyers, I'd say.
You have very rare occasions when you can actually you can rebuttal the appraisal, and it's got to be something very drastic, mistake, a computer error. That does happen, but for the most part, 99% of the time, yeah, you're stuck with that number.
Can you rebut it 4 months later, or you still?
You really have to show gross negligence, I think, Luke, right?
Yeah, it's got to make sense. I mean, anything that, we're sent, where there's, some potential errors in the appraisal, or if there's, potentially better comparables, we'll review that internally with our review team. If it makes sense, we pass it on to the appraiser. So yeah, it just has to make sense and, have support for it. So, it definitely happens where, we're provided some additional data by the realtor, the borrower, whoever it might be, the loan officer will review it. And there are, scenarios where I'm sure, the appraiser could consider this, and sometimes it does make, a value change in that appraisal.
So, and it's only FHA. Conventionals, you can replace it 30 days later, and it could be higher and it wouldn't matter.
Correct.
Right?
Yep. I know, again, the GSEs are recording all of this. So that's, something that has changed. I'd say this has been in play for the last, I want to say, at least 4 or 5 years now. Time is flying, but each time doesn't matter if it's an FHA, a conventional, whatever it might be, we're always submitting a version of that report to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and they're recording each version of it. So if there's one appraisal at 200,000 and, a few days later, another version at 250,000, they're recording that, and we will most likely see some type of warning that. And again, on the lender side, they see even more than we do, the underwriters. So that's all being recorded too.
Right, and just as far as a timetable on how the appraisal works, the appraisal is ordered from local appraisers. So even though Luke is in Chicago, he runs the AMC, which stands for Appraisal Management Company, but they're sending their subs, I guess, for lack of a better word, that are appraisers local here. They do the appraisal report. It gets sent to Luke. They review it based on what he responded, but they also get sent to the GSEs, and they have their own system, as do our underwriters. So every once in a while, you'll have kind of like the scenario with the flip, fix and flip, or something strange. Maybe it was a divorce or something where the original price was much lower. So we'll have to get some kind of explanation on why. But there is a process that the appraisal goes through as far as they want to make sure that the value is there. Bottom line.
Okay. The next question I got was, how does the appraisal work on a 203K?
Similar idea, so it's no different than like a new construction. So what a 203K is, that's just simply a rehab loan. So typically what we'll have from the appraiser is they will sometimes provide a as-is value, which means that the property as it sits will value it. But then we're also being provided with a scope of work or a contractor's bid where you're putting in a brand new kitchen, brand new flooring, a new bath, things like that. So at that point, the appraiser will make the appraisal subject to these renovations. So even if the property looks horrible, I'm going to use my imagination and say, we're going to have a new this and a new that. So now the comparables that I'm looking for, I'm expecting to look for, comparables with a new kitchen, new bathroom, new flooring, things like that. So once that subject property's construction is actually completed, the lender would request a final inspection. The appraiser would go out there and make sure that everything has been completed as we were told in that contractor bid. And then we do something called a 1004D, which is a final inspection form, and the appraiser signs off, says everything was completed, as it should have been. You're good to go now. So that's how that typically works for a 203K or a home style renovation. Same idea.
So then, Ruben, you get an appraisal at the purchase price as is, and then what is it, like a reappraisal or you get evaluation?
Subject to appraisal is what and just for the record, it has to appraise both. So if you're paying 100,000 for the property, and we're going to lend you 20,000 for additional to fix it, has to appraise as is at a minimum of 100,000, and it has to appraise subject to at a minimum of, well, it's a little more than that, whatever the loan to value is also. So on an FHA, it'd be 96.5% of the total loan amount.
Okay,
So it has to appraise both.
In that one, you're using creativity or you're looking for comp? Because I mean, if you're looking at something that is, gutted.
No, you're like you said, you're imagining, they're imagining it's done.
What do you look?
Yeah, so we're looking for comps that, are similar to what the subject will look like. So that's the subject to value. So if you're going to put a brand new kitchen and bath in that property, the comparables that I'm expecting to see in that appraisal also have a brand new kitchen and bath. So that's how we're justifying the subject to value, that when you complete this is what you'll most likely be worth. So it's all, got to be supported by the sales in the neighborhood with those, similar upgrades, let's call them.
Okay. So Ruben, that's a loan that we don't get seen use a lot. I don't know why, because you would think that will be a loan that everybody should be, taking advantage of.
Well, again, during when we had the a lot more REO sales, we saw a little more of it because they were abandoned or they were, stripped or whatever. So we did see more of them, but it is a longer process. And, so just for the timeline, so we get the appraisal done by Luke and they give us both values and we're good. We're going to close on the house as is. So in the $100,000 example, that's a purchase price, seller goes away, buyer now owns the house, and we do draws based on the amount of work being done. So it's not like they get the $20,000 up front. $20,000 in South Florida doesn't pay for a whole lot. So, but typically we think that the 203K specifically is really good for specific, one item things like a roof. The house needs a roof. It's very easy to do because it's one contractor. They can actually put a roof on pretty quickly now, even nowadays. So that works really well. But it is a time frame issue. Most people are looking for a house. They're looking to move into a school district to get their kids in. So the time frame typically is what the issue is. Because it does take long for the house to be finished. And also the contractor is another part of the equation now that beyond the two realtors, the lender, the appraiser, now you have a contractor, then most of the time the delay is with them in the paperwork.
Okay. To everybody watching us on social media, if you have any questions, please go ahead and post them and we'll get back to you. Same thing on everybody on Zoom. On the rebuttal, Ruben, does the realtor communicate with a local sub, or they communicate straight through the lender?
Well, typically they go to the loan officer and they say, look, we want to do a rebuttal. The loan officer will tell them what they need, kind of what Luke just said. Hey, don't send them 20 comps, something, and it gets sent up and it gets sent directly to Luke's company and they take a look at it and they have a discussion. We are not allowed to, the loan office is not allowed to speak directly to the appraiser. Okay. So, in my position or Luke's position, a little different. We do have a little leeway, but I try not to either. I go straight to Luke and have him, he's the expert now. We bring out the points that the realtor brought out, or the homeowner brought out, and put it down on paper, and it takes a couple days usually. And most of the time, if it's a true rebuttal, they do a great job in making the changes. And everybody makes mistakes, so we do have mistakes at times, but most of the time the appraisers get it right.
No, I will tell you that the volume that we do probably maybe once a month. There's one in there, and it's usually like Ruben said, our neighborhoods, Luke, they change by streets drastically.
Sure.
They might just might have picked something from across the street, which is $100,000 less, and it fluctuates that way. What do you guys see? Because one of the questions I have is I keep saying I'm not doing Chicken Little. I don't see the sky falling. I don't. I think that there will be. A big percentage have already come back into making their payments, and the ones that have not made their payments, I think there will be another HARP type solution that'll be rolled out at some point in time, because if everybody's being built. If Carnival Cruise Line is being bailed out, I think that the homeowner that keeps the economy going should be not bailed out, but assisted. But when you're looking at evaluations, are you guys looking already at those homes that are in deferred payments, or you're not looking at that data yet as a forecasting valuation?
So on the appraisal side, we don't get any of that forbearance data with, borrowers that, opted into the program. So that's more so on the servicing side, which the appraiser has no access to.
Okay.
So we're not paying any attention to that. We're aware of, the whole COVID situation, what's happening in the market. A lot of appraisers have a statement, and we're, everybody's in a bit of a unknown territory right now with what will happen. To be honest, in Chicago, I finished a rehab that I was working on just when COVID hit. And I wanted to sell it as fast as possible because I said, I don't know what's going to happen. I had a feeling, the market might tank. So I sold it as fast as possible. Everything worked out well. But to my surprise, total opposite happened. We've got a shortage in the market. And it's, it's uncharted territory for everybody right now. I'm guessing for Ruben, but I don't know if he would have predicted, such low rates. I know I haven't, but no, any of the forbearance data we're not looking at. That's really going to start coming into play depending on what happens. I know, a lot of those forbearances are starting to come to an end. I think some of the FHA ones are extended. So until, that starts really hitting the market. So let's say worst case scenario, if people have to start, selling their houses quickly, because they can't make the payments, that would obviously reflect, negatively on the market once we start getting a flood of properties. Or it might be the complete opposite where, people, start making the payments, or the government, provides some kind of assistance on the mortgage payments, and there is no effect. Right now it's all of my friends ask me, should I buy now? Should I sell now? I have no idea. It's a great time to sell. Prices are very high. But we're also seeing predictions that they're going to keep going higher. So right now it's a big question mark, to be honest, but it's rates are very low right now, and it's a great time to buy something and borrow money, because I don't want to say it's free, but it's the closest I've seen to being free.
Yeah. So Broward County entry-level housing under 450, right? Single family homes, we have a month and a half of inventory.
Yeah.
So when people tell me, all the forbearances are gonna flood the market, like, listen, we need to get to 7 months of inventory
before
we begin to see a shift. So we got to go from 1,500 homes to 9,000 a month homes
Yeah.
in the market for 2 months or 3 months consecutive to begin to see a disruption of valuation. You're talking about 40,000 people putting the homes for sale at once.
Yeah, unlikely.
In 2009, at the peak of 2009, that did not happen.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a lot more defaults at that moment. So,
Oh God, yeah.
you know, I don't see it, Ruben. I know that you guys have a lot of data because you're lending money, so you want to make sure that you get paid back. So you guys are looking at the data, you know, probably daily. So
You know, kind of like what Luke said. I mean, the GSEs have, you know, this is not a political statement or anything, but they've done a great job. They let the appraisal right away. The appraisal thing was taken care of. I mean, I think they were very concerned about that. And as far as forbearance, you know, they've all worked a little different, whether it's Fannie, Freddie, or HUD. You know, they've all worked a little different, but they seem to be doing the right things at the right time to kind of keep the housing market to where it's at. So yeah, you know, like Luke said, man, with the rates where they're at, I mean, it's very, very busy right now, industry wide. You know, one thing I know we've talked a bunch of times, Ernesto, we talk almost every day, but is that they mentioned to me the other day, one of the reasons that we're also so busy is that, and that never occurred to me, that there's a lot less mortgage companies. And there's a lot less appraisers than there were in 2008 and 2009. So between consolidation and people getting out of the business, like, you know, I'm still state certified like Luke, but I haven't done an appraisal in forever. So I'm one of those guys who just, you know, is out of the business, the appraisal business. So there's a lot of people like that. So that's part of the problem too, that for many years, you know, because of the decline, you know, a lot of mortgage companies, you know, just don't exist anymore. So that's one of the reasons also that they're so busy and we're so busy.
So you don't see, based on the data you guys have, you're very confident on the market moving forward in 2020.
Oh yeah. I mean, Ruben, I've heard that rates are going to stay low. I mean, all of 2020, 2021 is what I'm hearing, that they're just going to stay where they are, maybe inch up a tad bit and drop back down is what I'm hearing. So, I mean, that really gives people more buying power, I'd say.
You know, I mean, you know, nobody's got a crystal ball. Nobody expected what we're going through now. I know in December 2018, we expected the rates to pop up, and that never happened through 19 before even COVID. So nobody really knows. But I mean, the amount of money we're printing, you know, and so you're more of an economist than I am. The amount of money we're printing is there's no way these rates can go up at all.
That 10-year does not like 6. I mean, it's
Right.
just it's below 6, and you know, it just and the thing is that there's so much with everything that we're printing. You will think that there would be an appetite, and there's such an appetite for that 10-year bond that it's unbelievable. And it's not us buying it. It's every foreign entity in the planet is buying that America 10-year bond like solid, just, you know, literally just parking money there. So, Luke, thank you so much. I think you covered a lot of stuff. There's one last question, and I think you answered already. Conventional comes in low. Can you do it again 30 days later?
Yep.
Okay. So in conventional, there's no restriction. You can just
exactly
do it.
Yep. No problem there.
One last thing that came in, commercial. Do you guys do commercial at all?
We do commercial. Yep. We do both.
But that's a whole different monster. That's the
totally different. I mean, you could have comps from, you know, across, you know, we've done comparables where the property's in New Jersey and they're using comparables in California if needed. So there's totally different ball game there.
Yeah, that's and a lot pricier. I mean, it's
there's no standard fee.
$75. No. You're talking thousands of dollars.
Exactly. Everything gets bidded out.
Yeah. So, you know, I can tell you that, you know, you cover a lot of stuff, and between both of you, and, you know, and I think some of the questions were, you know, with the pulse of where our market is down here.
Yeah.
Because we are seeing the rehabs coming into the market, and some people having issue. We're seeing, because of the rise in price. I mean, think about it. If we have a month and a half of supply, you're pushing the values every month up. I mean, it's just consistently. So it's hard to catch up. But I'm glad you explained all the data that you guys look at to justify that valuation. Because I mean, you know, it's a lot of information, and you know, I think we cover a lot of good material. If you guys wanted to add anything in closing, Ruben.
No, again, thank you for inviting us. It's great to hear from Luke and give you a very updated perspective on what's going on with valuation nowadays, and you know, more to come. I think, you know, thank God that that everybody's safe, and we'll be back with you, I guess, in a couple days.
Good. All right, Luke, a pleasure to meet you. As soon as COVID is over and I'm over in Chicago, I'll let you know so we can, you know, go to Giordano's and.
I am looking forward to that. That'll be nice.
Everybody that's watching, this is going to be recorded and posted on our YouTube channel, so you can watch it later. Luke, I'll send it to you and Ruben so you guys can have it if you want to watch it.
Sure.
I mean, I was told by my office, you're going to do an appraisal presentation. That's going to be boring. Actually, we had a very good attendance and a lot of good, but I think were good questions. Everybody's like, you got to talk appraisals? That's like dull. And I'm like, listen, you know, that's the deal. Ruben cannot give you the money unless Luke says you're okay. So no matter what, if Luke doesn't say go for it, Ruben cannot sign that check, right, Ruben?
Right.
All right.
Very
Thank
true.
you everybody for watching. Thank you for staying tuned. Stay safe. And if you have any questions, send me a message. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks,
Bye, guys.
Ernesto. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.